Good morning, Jamie.
Good morning.
Good afternoon and good night. The reason why I say this is because no matter how much I try to do a certain format, it's virtually impossible. And I say that in all of the love in my heart because the amount of time that I have in the day does not allow me to do everything. And the reason why I film this content is because it is far more effective than sending out an email or communication, because the issues that I'm dealing with is so multifaceted that it's virtually impossible to get my thoughts out in one uniform context. So by having two forms of communication, one is a private video, one is a public video, and obviously at my discretion I can make one private versus the other one public and vice versa. And the reason why I say this is because there are human beings who don't want their business out there. And I very much respect that. But at the same time, when you're dealing with circumstances that are not only illegal, law enforcement is ignoring it. So for example, right now, yesterday, I had to watch a documentary on Netflix called Untold, and it's a series of documentaries which feature some very difficult to believe circumstances, but they're actually all real, believe it or not. And Jamie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
What day is today?
Today is Wednesday, April 29th, 2026.
So the reason why I'm going into all of this is because I watched a fascinating documentary about Hawthorne Hill and dressage. And I say that because the entire sport is fascinating to me, because whenever you're dealing with anything equestrian and you're dealing with anything that's obscure, it's fascinating to me how these people are able to sustain the income to do the actual performances, and I'll explain to everyone why. A year or two ago, I was at the New Jersey State Fair doing barbecue, but next to me was a very interesting competition where they were featuring some sort of an equestrian process. And luckily for me, I neither have a daughter nor a child that's interested in equestrian, because it's not only an expensive sport. When after the documentary, and this morning Jamie and I are talking, and I'm breaking down what my opinion is of the documentary, and obviously everyone should really watch this documentary because they dive into a subject matter which is cyberbullying and passive-aggressive cyberbullying, as well as the context of how the courts play such a pivotal role in the actual narrative as it's released. Because remember, Netflix and a channel are very different. And the reason why I say this is, Jamie, can you find out with your little machine over there how many active subscribers currently Netflix has worldwide?
Yep.
And the reason why I say this is because when you're dealing with a company like Netflix, most people don't really understand that there are so many subscribers of Netflix that disseminate their content publicly via, a great example is a dentist office. When you go into a dentist office, virtually every single dentist has Netflix. They don't all have Hulu, they don't all have HBO, they don't all have the other apps, but almost every single one of them has Netflix. Do you agree with what I just said?
100%.
Okay. I didn't think she was going to say 100%, but let's say that even if it's 50%.
I think that Netflix is kind of the gold standard of like streaming apps. I think if you're going to have any streaming TV app, Netflix is kind of like the base one. The
reason why I say that is because you're never going to get less than one viewer. And why I say this is because when you get one viewer per phone, that's one instance of two eyeballs in one human being. Very rarely is a phone content disseminated publicly. So very rarely do people plug their own phones in to show on the screen what's going on. And a lot of that has to do with privacy, as well as the reality of, like, you know, if you're a human being that is in a professional environment, you get some text, and the text is like from your friend that's like, yo, we're going to Las Vegas this weekend. And like, there's nothing bad about any of that, but if you're a 32-year-old man and you have your phone plugged in and you have a group chat with your other 32-year-old male friends and you have your phone connected and an 11-year-old kid is watching it, you know, you're going to cross over hypothetically into a territory that you don't want to. And anyone knows this. This isn't like, I'm not broadcasting anything that's major or big. What's the answer mathematically?
So
I would say 300 million is my answer.
325 million paid subscribers.
Okay, so my answer was 300 million. And ironically enough, that's about how many people live in the United States. And these numbers are, the reason why I say this is because if you understand the concept of an IP address, I want to express to everyone that Netflix allows multiple users in a family to use the account. So when you're dealing with things like that and you're able to stack into the fact that when you're dealing with international human beings who are living on a completely different budget than domestic, you can have dozens, if not hundreds of users with one single account, let alone the multiplying factor of the quantity of accounts that are disseminating content for more than one human being. So a dentist office with one Netflix subscription is showing that content to 200 different human beings in a week. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. So when you're using a multiplier like that, I would have to say rather than 320 million, the real number is about 1.5 billion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Okay, so the reason for that is because it's just a matter of statistics. There is approximately 8 billion eyeballs. There are children. There are humans that live in trees. There are humans that live on islands that have never seen electricity. All of that is great, but the majority of human beings that live on this planet have access to a television, and that television, most likely than not, obviously there's countries like China who have their entire communication systems controlled by their government, and that is the choice of those people to do that. I'm currently dealing with a human being that is of Chinese origin, and one of the reasons why I have this Milwaukee set here is because in the real world, this Milwaukee set, by the way, is not working, and it is a very expensive system, and this battery doesn't work. So when you're a human being that's dealing with a certain type of issue, other than contacting a lawyer, communicating with a corporation that is $1 billion company designed to ignore human beings who have issues or are outside the warranty. So essentially, that's where pro-slave really comes in, and I'm going to be able to utilize the reality of the circumstances, but I did want to express to the human being that Ms. Resnick is communicating with that the Chinese standard and the American standard in tools is very, very different. And in my personal opinion, this human being actually lives in Short Hills, not China. But the reason for that is because cultural differences are often selectively used when it's convenient for certain individuals. So for example, this is the type of human being that will selectively utilize time difference or a misunderstanding verbally at a time where she is not in a positive position. So it is only convenient for her to utilize cultural differences. Just like these tools. When you want to talk about Chinese standard, you're not discussing it in context with a company like Harbor Freight, because Harbor Freight sells Chinese standard tools, which is why they're considerably less expensive than the tools sold at Home Depot or Lowe's, because that's an American standard. And the reason why I say it like that is because I am not born in America. I was not born in America. I came to America via my parents' decision, which was probably one of the best decisions they've ever made in their entire lives, both as children, adults, or even the relatives that they have. The United States of America is a really, really great country. Geographically speaking, it is one of the most beautiful countries in the entire world, and it offers a very, very large, wide variety of things that you can do, irregardless of the circumstances you were born into. Many countries, such as Russia, China, and alike, those possibilities do not exist. No matter what you do or say, if you're not born into a set of circumstances or born with the intellect in order to break through or be a valuable member of society, you're never going to get the opportunity. Whereas in America, you don't need to do that. You could just work really, really hard and be yourself and get what you want. That's not the way it works in the rest of the world. There is something called reality. And in the concept of reality, I was under the impression that I was able to communicate with this person because of my cultural understanding of different types of cultures and really express to everyone that we're dealing with an issue that's in the geographical location of the United States. Within the context of the United States, tools, human beings, and real estate are valued at a very different level and understanding than the rest of the world does. So standards are applicable when it comes to certain types of things. When it comes to humanity, there is no standard. A human being is a human being all across the globe. That is a universal standard. So to be able to arbitrarily treat humans like tools is only a sign of the other human. So it doesn't matter if they're Russian, Ukrainian, Alaskan, American. You understand? Alaska's in America for anyone who doesn't understand that joke. But the point of what I'm trying to explain to you is that there is an understandable difference, and then there is bullshit. And bullshit is not something that I'm really interested in dealing with because I don't have the time. I haven't seen my boys in a very long time. I have nothing but headaches on my plate, and my threshold for how much bullshit I personally am willing to tolerate is at a point 0. In case anyone doesn't understand how algebra works, 0 is not a number. It is the opposite of a number. So there's 1 through 9, and then there's 0. And a lot of people don't really understand that concept, and it's taken me a very long time to really understand just how dumb the majority of human beings are, but it is what it is. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm an intelligent person, and because I cleared my nose, that doesn't mean I'm on drugs. It means that I have snot in my nose from actually being really upset, if anyone gives a flying fuck. But the reason why I'm really upset is because my endless attempts to resolve conflicts in a positive way are met with nothing but lies and conflict, like as if there is some sort of a venom that is running through the hearts of every human being. So no matter what I say or do, you will always compare me to a documentary like HorROAR Hill,
Hidden Hill or whatever, but yes,
whatever, it's HorROAR Hill. That's all it is. But the reality is that there was a girl in the show. Her name is Lauren, and then there is a guy named Michael. And they have a Barristone. But, you know, like it is what it is.
Yeah.
I'm going to put my glasses back on, not because I'm on drugs or because I'm hiding, but because the lights are killing my eyes. But the reason why I say this is because when you go into the context of the story, there is a very important and crucial element that requires you to listen carefully. There is zero explanation or excuse for shooting another human being. So before I even begin, please understand that there is zero. Like 0 means 0.
Yeah.
And when you have that happen, a human being must be removed from society for a minimum of a decade. So the fact that this human being not only was only removed from society for barely a year, but that's just a complete and utter failure on both the criminal justice system as well as the human beings that are associated with delivering a verdict, because there's something mentally wrong with human beings that can justify a shooting based on no matter what the circumstances are. That being said, once I've said that, I want to express that I do believe that both parties were involved in a very sinister and an extremely psychologically manipulative and dangerous. That's what I was looking for, dangerous. They were involved in a very dangerous game of cat and mouse. And when you get into things like that and you're dealing with a human being who, like for example, I can give you both parties' perspective in a coherent and logical way, but I would need a co-host that is present mentally. And what I say that is Jamie has this thing where she just simply checks out. There is no understanding that we're not talking about anything, that there is a requirement to, she just, I don't know what she's doing. She's probably doodling or something like that. But in my opinion, it would be really awesome if she engages in a conversation. But to do that, I would have to first say something negative, and then, there is no concept where I start filming, I start talking about something, and Jamie says, okay, I want to assist. She's like smiling over here. She doesn't actually comprehend how difficult she makes my life. So when people do that, they don't actually understand that the ramifications of their actions hurt the people that they think that they're helping. So in the context of the actual documentary, both parties were not interested in helping either party. They were expressly interested in hurting the other party. I don't think Jamie's interested in hurting me. I just think that she doesn't really comprehend that she is at no point in a position to be silent. But, who am I to make her speak? I am nothing more than a guy that's trying to do the best he can. Like, for example, in the documentary, one of the things that I found to be really disturbing is I think that this girl, Lauren, treats horses better than humans. And I felt that, please understand that you're seeing only 1 hour, maybe an hour and a half of footage from an 8-year issue, which starts in 2018 and is still ongoing as the filming of this content is going on. So over the course of 8 years, you're talking about human beings who themselves have piles of evidence, let alone the reality of what a third party sees. So the concept of judging anyone on 90 minutes is laughable. But when you look at the actual context of what's being said, it would be amazing if Jamie would open her mouth eventually and actually say something. So as you notice,
why don't you tell us what is being said then in the video?
I've been talking about nothing but that. It would be nice if you actually were coherent enough to ask a question that is relevant to the context of what I'm saying, instead of just being in la la land. So we'll just continue, letting Dan continue. So the point of what I'm trying to explain is that Miss Resnick can easily just say to me, what is your view on Michael's side? Or what is your view on Lauren's side? Or 1,000 other questions. But to do that, she would have to actually be present. See? So the point of what I'm trying to express to everyone is that Jamie doesn't do anything under pressure. Humans that are under pressure cannot perform. It is a myth that I've created when I show her speaking, because the amount of work that I personally have to do in order for her to open her mouth on camera is not only ungodly, the entire concept of being able to control what Netflix shows their audience is not only a joke. It's kind of sad that the people that signed the waiver really didn't understand what they are, and which is clickbait. They themselves are humans that are the entertainment. And when we're dealing with an issue like me and the conflicts that I have in my personal life, my professional life, the core of in my opinion, the issue is Ms. Resnick will be the first person to create the conflict on her side, but to help me out and actually talk. Watch, I'll be quiet. What do you got?
Okay, you're right. I create a lot of conflict.
No, what do you have to say? Forget about that. That's just to stimulate and maybe say, okay, what do you have to say about the documentary that we watched yesterday?
I thought that they glossed over a lot of things. I thought that there was a lot of information missing, and I thought that both sides looked like they were at fault. And you brought up a lot of other interesting facts that I didn't think of.
Uh-huh. What's your opinion? Do you have any questions that would be relevant like say that you represent the 2 to 20 million people that are watching this? Is there a single thing that you would like to say on behalf of the audience?
On behalf of the audience, I felt like they didn't tell the full story.
What are the questions that you're looking for?
I believe that more led up to it. I believe that there was more behind this.
What are the questions? Let's try again. I want everyone to understand that when I speak directly to a human being, it is very often misunderstood for bullying, harassment, and sheer and utter difficulty. But the reality is that most people cannot answer a single question directly because they've been used to a lifetime of protecting their own interests rather than dealing with the question at hand. So the real question at hand is, what questions do you have to ask? And Ms. Resnick,
What else was going on in the background?
Okay, that's a good question. For anyone that's wondering, the reality is that the context of the problem is far understated from the financial standpoint. So for example, there's something called tenant-landlord laws. They play a big part in the conflict. But the second issue that they have is there's, UCC and commercial laws that cross into the transaction. So a residential transaction becomes a commercial transaction the second that she buys the horse from this guy or pays him to keep her horses at this stable and groom them. So there's a very complex, heavy legal burden that is simply not being able to be sustained by this man, Michael. He also doesn't really understand that Lauren Canarak's motivation is simple, clear, and nothing more than, I want to ride horses and I will do it at any price. And he doesn't really understand that she didn't come there because she just felt like stealing his property. He was in need of money. You see, he was going through both a bitter divorce and a decline in his career as well as popularity, and coupled with a very, very serious set of circumstances that, frankly, when you really look back at the situation, a lot of the reason why COVID and the issues that we had is because our attention as a society was at a boiling point. So this incident didn't just happen in 2005, 91, it happened in 2018. It happened in 2018. And the reason why I say this is because that is the height of the venom on a public scale. Obviously, we as a society have been able to dial it back, but the audience doesn't really understand that Lauren Canarak did not go on YouTube and speak directly. What she did was post an insane amount of things on Facebook, which is a very big part of a community that values integrity in a sport such as dressage. So she didn't attack the human, she attacked his reputation in a digital world. Horses are not ridden in a digital world, but money is made on a reputation. So she was very smart in her attack from a civil litigation perspective, and he was on the losing side. And rather than addressing the issue and dealing with the fact that he sold, his soul to the devil, which is basically, rather than being transparent and honest, has said, look, I was having some serious financial issues. This girl and her father came to me at a time where I wasn't able to manage my finances. I took the money. I made a huge mistake. Please, let's work it out. Rather than doing that, he invented in his own head a series of circumstances that both were real and made up at the same time. Meaning that, was Lauren Canarak and Rob Goodwin trying to instigate something with him? Yes. Were they interested in physically hurting this man? Not really. Were they very upset that he runs a quasi-con artist operation? Because what this man actually does, in case you're not paying attention to this, is he is selling a dream that's not realistic. Because he was one of the 100 human beings on the U.S. Olympic dressage team in the fucking century that he's talking about. For anyone that's wondering, a century doesn't need to be from 1900 to 2000. It could be from 1920 to 2020. So a century is nothing more than 100 years. Where you place the century is the applied aspect of it. So what this man really was doing, and which is really not a moral thing to do, which is he is in a sport that requires massive amounts of money. It doesn't just get generated out of nowhere. But there's a lot of people who are interested in riding horses, dealing with many of the other services that he offers. They are not upset about being, quote, ripped off. Because they're not actually ripped off. They're getting what they pay for. He's not pretending to be someone he's not. He is Michael Barrasone. He was into one Olympics. I don't even know if he won a medal or not. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. He makes a really good point regarding the mathematics of just being on a team that's in the Olympics and the difficulties
I don't think
of
that
it.
they mentioned it. They feel like they glossed over a lot of things.
I mean, you can't gloss over something that you say. So if they talked about it, that means that they talked about it. So what did you think they glossed over?
Oh, like what he did in the Olympics, how he did, if he medaled. I don't remember hearing
All right,
any of
so
that.
I'm going to explain to you how that works. You see, that documentary is not made in 1994. That documentary is made in 2026. So the documentary is really designed for you to take your phone out and start looking at things up. And your phone already knows that you watched the documentary because your entire identity is linked up. So once you start looking at the stuff, that's when you give Netflix their money. The more interested you are in things that you don't know, the more times you use your phone to find the answer. Do you now understand? The more fascinating...
I understand that, but I don't understand why Netflix wants that.
Because Netflix works in paid advertising on a global scale. So when Netflix makes a documentary about dressage, they know that people are going to go down the rabbit hole and get to the fact that Michael Bloomberg's daughter is involved in equestrian. When they go down that road, there's a whole shitload of advertising that is going to spike up. And Netflix is going to get paid on the back end by dealing with the marketing representatives that represent the interests of Hermes. And Hermes is a very, very famous equestrian brand. So when you're dealing with fashion and concepts that are far beyond the understanding, you will see that Hermes is going to start coming into fashion. Even though handbags and fashion are not popular right now, that doesn't mean people are not buying them, and that doesn't mean anyone understands anything about the actual world of luxury. The concept of something being worth something is only as good as someone else being able to buy it and quantify the value. So when you're dealing with something that is so...
So what are you saying? That Hermes benefits off of this video? Because people will go down the rabbit hole of looking for horses and then...
I think Hermes is an example of a company that would physically be advertising to wealthy human beings that are identified as the demographic possibility to buy a handbag based on their interest in dressage.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to explain. And furthermore, this wasn't a personal attack on Jamie. This was an example of how difficult it is to truly express yourself when you're under the lights, when you're under pressure, and you're dealing with circumstances that truly are at a point where your brain is not functioning. So what I want you to say is, can you publicly state whether or not you feel that you were just attacked on camera?
No, I don't.
Okay. It's very important that everyone understands that Jamie has voluntarily signed up for this role. This is a job. This job requires her to be a soundboard as well as a great example of the underlining issue that blocks human beings from resolving their conflicts. Had either Michael Barrasone or Lauren Canarak spent a second of their time looking at the other person's position from their perspective, in my opinion, there are hundreds of ways to resolve this issue without anyone getting shot or a single negative post. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason why I say this is because I actually had some parties, and this is Lauren Canarak. This is my high school yearbook. And I know a lot of people don't know this, but...
I think it's so interesting that she has nothing written.
Well, one of my quotes was taken out for my senior year, and what happens is, like, they accept your quote, and then when it gets printed, they're like, oh, you know, the editor didn't decide. Like, well, can I get a different quote? And no.
The editor decided what?
That it wasn't appropriate and things like that. So, for example, like during the Columbine year, which was this year, anyone with a quote that had to do with like a gun or shooting had their shit yanked after the print went in. So if you notice, one of the things that really, really, really bugged me about, there are two things that really bugged me about the documentary. Number one is when I'm dealing with an issue that's personal, I want everyone to know that I've known my wife for 26 years. I don't know how long Michael Barrisone and Lauren have known each other before this incident or before they had a conflict.
I think that they just met. Remember, she said that she.
I know. I'm trying to basically explain that there is zero comparison in my issue and this issue. Yet, human beings that are both in law enforcement and the opposing side would be like, see, you can easily get bullied into doing crazy things. And I want to say, like, okay, you would first have to believe both people at 100%, where I don't believe either one of them, to be honest. And which part is a lie, I actually don't even give a fuck. The whole thing is very scary on all levels, if you actually take a second to think about it, because there is a lot of validity if you choose a position. If you take the position of Lauren, there's, first and foremost, who the fuck gets shot? And, the other person is okay with it, saying, like, I'm going to go into the Olympics. That's number one. What kind of a message is that for the rest of the country, that you basically can shoot a person and then just, like, rock back and forth and cry in a court and, like, you'll get away with it?
I just don't think either.
That's a horrible message. Then there is the actual reality of just how manipulative this young Jewish girl was, because she had her father's money. And that part of it was slightly accurate in the thing is, but a lot of people don't really understand, like, Rob had to tackle this guy and, like, hold him down. And he's like Rob Goodwin's a hero, and, like, people are, like, glossing over that.
I thought that was really strange as well.
This guy's a hero. Like, this guy, like, gave up his life, and, like, she lived. Like, imagine if he wasn't there. She would have been fucking killed. And what? Then the guy would have been crying in a fucking cell and then would have gotten away with it, The whole thing is, like... and then there's, like, the sad reality that, so he's banned in the United States. It doesn't mean he can't go to France and compete on a stage where people are actually anti-American sentiment. So whatever negativity he received in America would actually use, or like Russia or things like that. So the sad reality of the whole thing is that New Jersey, especially on a county level, really makes you scratch your head as far as, like, this guy Michael Barrisone reached out to law enforcement, and they kind of, like, laughed at him.
But once again, I feel like there's a lot of this story that we don't know.
So, can I ask you an honest question before we wrap this up?
Yeah.
So, first and foremost, now that I remember, Lauren Kenner went to a couple of my parties, and I wasn't friends with this girl. I don't want anyone to think I've never even met Rob Goodwin as an adult. Like, I might have, like, brushed, like his buddy Pete and my friend Pete. That it's the same person. I mean, we have a mutual acquaintance. Let's put it like that. And so I don't want anyone to think that I'm, like, inventing a story that never happened. So that part of it, I want everyone to know that the only thing that me and this girl, and she has a sister and whatever, it doesn't matter. But the point is, neither one of the sisters was I friends with. So there's no stories. The sad reality of the whole thing is that the entire concept of what happened needs to be really dissected in a 1 or a 0. So, for example, at the end of the day, if you had a gun to your head, whose side do you see more, Lauren or your trainer? And I don't want you to think about anything I've said except what we talked about on YouTube. What do you got? Whose side do you see? There's no guilt or fault that you have whatsoever.
If you're gun to head, I say her, because anybody who can pretend to be crazy and put on that act for so long and then act not crazy there's more going on there, and that's like a level of sickness that I can't even put my finger on.
Right. So,
and like she at least she might be not in her great place, but like she didn't change her character. She's like, hey, I sent it, I did this, and like he's the one pretending to be crazy. Right. So
that's a really good point, Jamie. I gotta be transparent with everyone that's watching this. One of the reasons why I pushed Jamie so far is because, believe it or not, she's a very intelligent human being. And I say this as a joke, believe it or not, because if you watch the first part of the segment, it's me basically putting her on the spot and saying some really difficult things. But if I were to ask her right now, and I would say, Jamie, would you prefer the kind of leadership that I should? Well, the reason is because we've been watching a lot of
Stern.
We've been watching a lot of The Boys and Homelander. He's got something. That's all I'm saying. Okay, and The Deep and like even Soldier Boys, Huey and Frenchie Butcher. I mean, when you're dealing with an absolute all-star lineup of actors that are delivering some of the best writing in modern times, it's very difficult not to cross into reality with the examples. So I apologize for anyone who is offended by some of the content, but I assure you, Amazon is the one that's creating a lot of my references.
Like you're like, I don't know the backstory to these people. They don't necessarily know the backstory about why you push me or whatever. And I can say that like I don't respond to people teaching me in a nice way. You know, like...
Wait, but I didn't actually ask the question.
I know where you're going.
No, I don't think you do, because I think that a lot of people don't understand the difference between what I do, which is direct communication to a human being who has spent their entire lives being put down. And what I do is I speak very directly, and I know that that person, as well as the majority of the audience, will think that what I'm doing is very painful and bad. But the reality is that, do you see the difference between human beings in a courtroom that are lying to you and yelling at you versus the extremely difficult position I force you into to get out the one morsel what I needed, which is the reality that she didn't change. This guy did.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't even look like the same fucking human being, and like no one needed him to put this act on in court if he's pleading temporary insanity. I don't think people really understand the legal math behind it. Doesn't add up.
I think that's why
the legal math behind this entire thing.
I was like, it doesn't make like this isn't just a fraction of the story. Like, I feel like there's so much more to it.
Well, I think that ultimately at the end of the day, what you're dealing with is a set of circumstances where you got to also remember timing. So she gets shot in like August 2018. Rittenhouse was 24 months later. So she's barely recovering, and we're balls deep in COVID. So prosecution and the case and everything is very heavily affected by COVID. Yeah. So when it goes to trial in 22, people don't really understand that this paradox of just like, of course it's okay that this girl got shot, can only happen when our society's brain is completely thawed, frozen, and it's de-thawing, and we're looking at it now from a 2020 hindsight of 2026, and we're like, wait a second, what did we just do as a society? We just basically sent the message that if you don't like something on the internet and are pushed to a point where you could, like put on this fucking act, just like, trust me, you guys want to see insane, I'll show you insane. I act like myself in court and I'm called insane. So like, you can imagine what I would do. Exactly right. Yeah. So like, please, like, and I know a lot of people don't really believe in this, but I've clocked more courtroom hours than almost any attorney in their entire lives in the last 5 years. So I have enough experience dealing with both judges that are difficult, and I've dealt with judges that are easy. I've dealt with honest judges. I've dealt with fucking literally criminals that are wearing black robes. And one thing that
also, the other thing that you mentioned that really stood out was that all the psychiatrists that testified were like old as dirt. None of them were.
So that's another reason. I don't want to move on from the issue of the way I communicate before closing the loop in Jamie. Do you agree with me that there's a very big difference between a motivated teacher such as myself that's using a technique that is stern and extremely, extremely difficult as a person who's communicating with me, but in reality, do you know the difference between that and being shitted on?
Yeah.
Do you
100%.
do you prefer to be communicated with in a loving, like constantly appeasing way, or do you want a stern, fast Band-Aid ripped off, like, what are you doing? Like, whatever the opposite of shut the fuck up is. That's whatever, you know.
Option 2.
Like
Stern.
Okay, so please understand that the way I communicate with Miss Resnick is based on a preset communication that we have. So what you see is a show. What Lauren Canarac was doing was sadistic to this guy because she knew that she understood the lexicon of both social media and psychology on a higher level and her father has more money / legal resources. So she, and then the one thing that I found really also super offensive was the chess references and the endless tirade about the king going down and I will kill this and do that. And I want to remind everyone that I play chess. So when I make a chess reference, that is a reference to the chess community. And one of the only things that I've said is any pawn can take the queen, but the game is not over until the king is down, which is really about myself. And like I've said, boys protect the queen. And that's really a reference to me teaching the boys chess and being good to their mom. Like, I don't really think people understand that my references to chess are not only positive, they are designed so that we get to the root of what I'm trying to say. At no time am I saying, like, run the Sicilian defense and slice the queen or any fucking crazy things like that. So that's one thing that I'm extremely upset about. That also, the other thing is, it's very different for a person to put a post up versus speaking directly to the camera. And I'll explain to you why. When human beings read a post, every person that reads that post reads it differently. Whatever the voice in their head, how distracted they are, what state of mind they're in when they're reading, all of these factors contribute to the actual message that's being sent. When you're watching my content, maybe you're in a bad place and you want to watch it again. It's not going to change. It's going to be absolutely identical. And the difference and the ability to be consistent does not exist in either party. Neither one of these two clowns looked like their story was straight. And the reason why I say this is because
it's true.
I do believe what Jamie has said is correct. I don't believe that the message that the county, the Morris County and the state of New Jersey sent to the American people was correct. It was a very bad message, and I think that it's going to backfire significantly in the form of many things. And Lauren might be the positive recipient of 2 to the chest, but honestly, guys, think about the difficulties of being a human being and living their entire lives with the scars that this poor girl has, and understanding that, mathematically speaking, I don't even know how she survived it, to tell you the truth, if you know anything about biology and things like that. I think it's a miracle, and I think that the real heroes are the doctors that worked on her, who aren't even mentioned in the documentary. I don't even think they mentioned the name of the hospital, but most likely it was Morristown Medical, who saved my son's life also, in case anyone gives a shit. That's really what's going on here. We're talking about Netflix being able to identify a zeitgeist and understand that, nobody wants to see stories that already happened. So they take stories that they know will have very interesting outcomes. So, for example, nothing is not going to happen to one of those 2 people. I promise you. They're not just going to, live their life peacefully for the rest of their life.
One of the most offensive part of the whole thing to me was the lawyers. How they were just taking this
it's a job for them.
Show. And
it's for
one
lawyer.
And one of the things that really just made me realize how much the lawyers are so manipulative is when the lawyer for the
Michael?
guy,
he
would have her read part of her texts on the stand and not the text or the message in its entirety.
Right.
And when you took some of the messages out and read the whole thing, it was a quote from a Broadway show or a song or something, and it wasn't her words she was using in that context. And that was my relationship with Jared for 15 years, is everything was manipulated in some sort of fashion. So when I saw them doing that on the stand and manipulating it and just taking all these little things out of context, it just realized why there is always conflict. It's called LAWYER. lawyers.
Okay, I mean that's really like that's one of the reasons why I treat Jamie's words like a fucking pimple that I have to squeeze out, or like a tooth that I have to pull myself, because in the context of reality, I know a lot of people don't know this, but her ex-husband looks a lot like the prosecutor. I'm not joking about that. I mean, not as much as Joe Brady does, but you know, he's not like a doppelganger. I wouldn't use that word, but you know, my brother once famously told me that there's 400 faces in this world, and there's a lot of things my brother said in this world that I don't really agree with, but that one kind of made sense, and I kind of looked into it, and he's kind of right. And I say kind of because holla 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 holla. Big Chappelle Show fan over here. I say this in context to Jamie. You have a lot to offer. You have a lot to offer to this channel. You have a lot to offer to your kids. You are a human being that requires some asshole like me, fine, or whoever you choose to date in the future to tell you, hey man, you're a great human being. You are not one of the two people in the documentary, and if for some reason you see some similarities, neither is Mal, by the way. And that's why I kind of like, I say that, you know, you got to understand that I'm looking at this as the guy that got shot / holding the psychopath down that doesn't want to be a part of the documentary. So that's where I see myself. I see myself not as an innocent bystander, but more as like one of the few level-headed people that's saying, guys, whatever you think of me, what happened to the quarter of a century that both Mel and I were able to easily get through our issues? Whether it's a fight or it's a good time, we still managed to coexist.
Yeah.
What happened to that quarter of a century? How is one person's perspective on my channel or anything? What happened to the 5 years of me filming controversial content and having dinner with my wife and kids? Like, what happened to any of that? How can someone possibly isolate what they want in a video and point to a position?
Exactly.
And you okay?
Yeah, sorry.
No, you didn't do anything. I'm genuinely asking you.
Yeah,
Okay.
No, I don't know. This is the same thing about taking out of context from the messages, taking certain things you say in videos and not watching the entire video, or not watching multiple videos, or not understanding the context. And I think that's why when I watched the video last night, I was like, this is bullshit. There's so much more to this
Not
story.
only that, I think it's very important for people not to be afraid of the Constitution. What Lauren Canterac was actually doing was exercising her freedom of speech in the context of social media.
Yeah.
How and why she was doing it is of no business to anyone except Michael Barrisone, Lauren Canterac, and a judge / jury. But human beings cannot take the conflict into their own hands. They can't go about their business as if they're not liable for shooting Lauren Canterac. This guy, Michael Barrisone, shot Lauren Canterac.
That's it. Period.
That's it. Like, it's not that fucking complicated.
Yeah.
We just live in a society that goes into their own brain and somehow has the ability to not recognize that the two people that they brought up are too old to qualify for anything, let alone the fact that the guy with the face mask, fine, he was a little bit younger, he just had a goatee, he probably was in the late 50s, maybe mid 60s, but he was like, give me a fucking break, man. This guy was absolutely fine. Plus, why is he putting on this show right now if it's temporary insanity? Show me the videotape of what happens at night at trial. Is he insane? Is he like rocking back and forth to sleep? You know what I'm saying?
He can just unfollow her on Facebook too.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't really understand that part of it. So you can't really unfollow someone if you're in a community. So one of the things that I do understand is that when either my wife or someone says, you know, I can't exist in a certain community, there is some truth to that. But in my opinion, the reason why he was upset / afraid was not the same reason that he publicly stated. So what he was afraid of was being banned from the community by taking advantage of people. What he presented was that he was a victim of Lauren's manipulation.
Yeah.
Lauren is a Jewish girl from Livingston. They can't breathe without manipulating. It's in their blood. It's like a lemming not jumping off the side, or like a bear not shitting in the woods. It's like a Jewish woman from Long Island or New Jersey that is raised by a remotely wealthy father will do whatever she wants to get what she needs. She is an extremely motivated and scary character, which is one of the reasons why I was so happy not to have a daughter, is because I did not want to have a daughter. I had a great name picked out. I had everything like that. It's just that I know myself, and I know the kind of character that I breed based on my love, not my hate. My love is the creation of the monsters that have just completely bled me dry. And it's okay, because amongst all of this, I was able to somehow get these two beautiful boys to be born. And please understand that at no time in this entire narrative do I want anyone to hurt themselves or hurt someone else. And it's not a circumstance that I have any control over. I didn't invent the internet. I don't invent how much weight you guys put to the internet. And I sure as shit did not invent YouTube or any of the content that any other person that is not named Dan Reeses creates. So if you're a human being that is nauseated by what is created here, you're not really understanding that it is the other people that have been lying to you that you have accepted as reality. Yeah. That's the problem, not me. What I'm doing is expressing my position via very normal and coherent oral argument that is very complicated, because I am a complicated human being. I don't pretend to be an easy human being. I don't pretend to be someone who is not Dan Reeses. I know this is very difficult for people to understand, because by the very virtue of creating two instances of themselves, so there's the person that watches me on the internet and the person I run into. They're not the same people for the majority of human beings. Does that make any sense?
It makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad you said it.
All right, my name is Dan Reeses. There comes a point in every human being's life that they can't take anymore. For Michael Barrisone, the fact that he took a firearm and killed another, or excuse me, almost killed.
Yeah.
Oh, he didn't just shoot. He put two in the chest. Okay? Like a warning shot is more than enough if you're looking to like send a message. That's not just attempted murder. That's Michael Barrisone won the lottery multiple times in order for this to happen. If anyone's paying attention, he got a very good attorney who was very intelligent and was able to really play the zeitgeist card of both COVID and the confusion of social media and the influence it actually plays on the negative aspects of our lives. So we don't live in a world that warns.
I'm curious who paid for his lawyer.
I can tell you who paid for his lawyer.
Who? Because he definitely couldn't afford it.
Okay. So the way this works is an attorney like that will be able to do a job like that from the sheer exposure that you're going to get. So the core of the issue really comes down to life insurance. So for example, a guy like Michael Barrisone only has his ex-wife and maybe some creditors that gave him money for a few assets. So there's life insurance. There is a shitload of equity in rights. So, for example, let's say that you're an attorney who says to another human being, you know, I'll take the case, but if there's any rights to the story, you can't benefit from it anyway. I don't know if it's legal or not for an attorney to take the rights to a story as a form of equity.
Oh.
Do you understand?
Yeah, interesting.
You know?
Great question.
Then there's also a gold medal. Then there is like a ton of other assets. Like, just take a look at the safe. When you look at the safe, there's either a silver or gold bar in there. There's other firearms in there. There's a house that's worth a significant amount. Being an hour from New York City is an important factor. Geography, you know, the vastness of the estate, the reality of all of these things go into play. And remember, attorney-client privilege allows them to never disclose the nature of their relationship, nor is it something. So, for example, for Kyle Rittenhouse, any criminal attorney in the country would pay money to be a part of that, to be a part of that case. So there is, it's a little.
I guess I understand what you're saying. Like they do it for obvious reasons. Like if they'll be in the press, they'll have a story, they'll name it out there.
The guy's not an idiot. Let's put it like that. Okay, he knew that there's something there, and he
well, I mean, he won a New Jersey case getting on not guilty by reason of insanity.
It's once again, it's a really scary, slippery slope your guys are walking down. You're really talking about case law that's setting a precedent for something that really, like, unless you get a second COVID, it's not going to happen again.
Well, not only that, I think that you can't do mental health. Like, mental health is something on its own, and by doing this case law about like mental insanity and social media and not really studying it and having proper mental health things in place, it's causing more problems.
Well, I think the biggest mistake that was made on the prosecution side versus how well the defense played was the reality of there's mental health and there's internet mental health. And to be able to speak about that, you need a completely different human being. A human being who really understands the psychology of the human. Like, for example, me. I have no medical degrees. I'm not going into court, and I'm not dealing with the liability of the outcome of anything. So I will never be a person. But for example, I would be able to very clearly express that what you're dealing with is a very complex set of neurological fires that happens in sequence isolation, meaning that what happens in the person's brain versus what's happening in reality are not the same thing. And when you talk about accountability versus coherent capacity, they're not the same thing. And a lot of people who perhaps were either on the jury or are watching this content are not really coherent of the reality that the lawyer who represented the state really shit the money bed, where he didn't express to the jury that what we're dealing with is only, did XYZ have the capacity to be in a mental state at this time? And the reality is, with all due respect to the prosecution, all he had to do was show video from the jail or audio that is not from him or his attorney, and all of that audio should really have been put on display. He had a girlfriend that he was communicating with. Was he talking to her like a crazy person?
Right.
When you call a person in and out, like for example, when that warning message that said like this call is being recorded for legal purposes. So like for example, phone conversations are extremely important when it comes to the reality of proving a case, disproving a case, and for me, I go out of my way to never lie. And the reason for that is because humans that walk down that like path, like so for example, this guy Michael Barrasone or whatever, he basically needs to spend the rest of his life putting this act on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, forever.
Forever. For the rest of his life, he has to put this act on.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, that's really difficult to do. And
yeah. I just, as much as we keep talking about this,
can I get some of the lip balm?
Everything always comes down to mental health, and they always say like, what are the most...
No, everything comes down to money. This whole thing is about money, okay? If one of them had the money to buy the other one out, none of this would be happening. This is about money.
That's true.
That's it. Like, show me Michael Bloomberg's daughter having a conflict like this. You know why? Michael Bloomberg writes a check and we move on with our lives. But her father, it's a long story, but I don't know the family, I don't know the man, and I sure as shit am not going to spend a second of my life talking about someone who is suffering from a very serious issue of fear, dealing with his daughter almost dying. This is not a joke, ladies and gentlemen. Please have a little bit of empathy and sympathy for human beings that are dealing with these types of tragedies. One of the reasons why I'm so verbal and arrogant is because I'm never going to hurt anyone. So none of the possibility of this bullshit ever happening to myself versus like, yeah, people can hurt themselves based on this content, but that will only prove my point further that I am screaming at the top of my lungs that I need assistance in the real world. And you've got Child Protective Services showing up to a horse farm based on some fucking clickbait that was going on in the background. So we're not dealing...
Waste of resources.
It's not just a waste of resources. It's a national cry wolf campaign. And it's a very scary thing that we live in the type of world where if I don't make a YouTube video about it, the people who actually want to do something will do these stupid things. They will be motivated by the success of getting on Netflix or not understanding the severity of the lives that you're affecting. My name is Dana Lemresis, and please, just because I went to high school with Lauren Canarak doesn't mean I have ever been able to empathize with females, horse riders, or humans that have been shot out of a Facebook conflict. There's some real fucking seriously traumatic issues that we as a society need to respect both sides. But in reality, Jamie's right. No one deserves to get shot. And there's zero excuses for it.